right, folks, I get to have a great talk with an author here. He wrote a fantastic book, TARICK Walton, Secrets from MIT Tennis and the Umpire Above. You guys heard me plug this on one of our live streams here recently. Really enjoyed it. And Tariq, it's going to be great to get to know you a little bit, share some of the details in your book. Thanks for spending time with me.
Thank you for having me here, Brandon. It's such a pleasure to speak with you, and I'm looking forward to the frank conversation. I hope it goes somewhere where I'm comfortable with it or uncomfortable.
Hey, listen, it's going to go where it's going to go, in my opinion, and then we'll just kind of figure that out. But, look, the book is very transparent. You're very detailed about your journey from Jamaica to America to study at MIT. Your sports passions are interwoven in there, and of course, your faith is obviously a theme that drives your morality and all that. Give people just a generic overview of the book and what you were trying to accomplish by putting pen to paper.
I think that's the right way to kick off this conversation here, Brandon. I think what I wanted to do right from the start was to be transparent. I wanted to share my story, the ups and the downs, the failures and the successes, to ultimately be a mentor for the younger generation. I grew up in a family of educators. My mom is a teacher for over 45 years. Her siblings, if I do the math right, it is 8 of her 9 siblings are all teachers. So I came from that kind of background where I saw my mom teaching, both in the classroom, even at home as well. And, I'm thinking, what would be the best way to be a mentor for young minds remotely? It's not enough to do a mentorship from a video in literally 10 minutes. It's hard to do that. So that's why I wrote the book, to be transparent and show the real life story with images, with context, honest stories that can pull people in and share those mentorship moments.
Yeah, I'm really glad you too. And you mentioned that too. One of the things that I do enjoy very much, folks, these are like real color photos and they're blended in with the story as you're following his life's journey. So it really puts faces and some context. I love that so much about a biography, especially an autobiography, because sometimes I'll get it and there's like a section with photos, whatever. So kudos to you for doing that. And man, I couldn't agree with you more, especially when you think about the young folks of this age, the addiction to social media, the need for a mentor is huge. And I'm sure, and the book talks about some of that, that have inspired you, but what is it? Can you try to whittle down in a nutshell one of the biggest benefits to you in your life of having a mentor?
Oh my.
It's hard to pin. I know it's hard to kind of, give a soundbite on that, but it's one of those things where I'm always interested in trying to pass on those words of wisdom. And that's what I tell people: you need a mentor. You need someone.
You need a mentor, and I'll share with you a simple quote that I learned at a very critical point in my life. It was after a major failure, and I always found mentorship through books. And I remember reading a book in a library in high school, and the quote said, "It is smart to learn from your mistakes, but it's wise to learn from the mistake of others." And I think that is the nutshell there, Brandon, of what a mentor is. It is understanding their failures, having that one-to-one conversation. If it's in person, it's great to have that one-to-one. If it's, a distant approach where you're reading a book, it may not be one-to-one, but it's still intimate because you're seeing and hearing those life lessons that the mentor experienced. So I would think that is the number one message that I would share on the benefit and value of a mentor. It really teaches you not what to do, but what not to do.
Yes, yes, it speeds up that learning curve, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing is, and for anyone who doesn't think that they do that or doesn't understand the value in that, I challenge you, especially you're like me, where you're not particularly handy and you don't know how to do something, and you go to YouTube and watch a video, and basically all you're doing is having a passive mentorship on how to do whatever you're trying to do.
Hmm.
So I think what you're saying, Tariq, is to apply that to other aspects of your life, things that are maybe outside the box that people don't think about in day-to-day life. It's like you need a mentor to look up to help you maybe shave off some of these rough edges.
Well said there, Brandon. And I love the example that you shared about a YouTube page. You know, if you're going to YouTube and you're trying to learn, that's totally fine. But I think it's that one way passive learning experience where you're just regurgitating or repeating what the YouTube video explains. But I think true learning is going through that experience, figuring it out as you go along, taking the advice of individuals, and it smoothens those rough edges, as you said, but it also builds on the skill set. It builds on the talents because you're experiencing those critical moments that shapes your skills, your perspective. So it's very important.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that you're, and this is what your book does so well is just you really try to translate your journey in a way so hopefully other people can find themselves wherever they are in that path of similar. You know, maybe they're a young person not knowing what college to go to. I loved how you talked about that. It's like you have like this list that keeps growing of 9 schools, and you're going to submit applications, and you have a teacher who's like telling you, "Oh, you're going to waste your time. You're going to waste your time." That was one of the best things. I actually stopped reading and just kind of just let that sink in. I was thinking about my own life. I was thinking about my own journey. And, you know, we actually kind of did complete opposite things personally. Like I did the
Okay.
long list and got all his acceptance and then ultimately stayed home for financial reasons. I made just the best way to financially and stay independent, whether,
Mhm.
you know, and everyone has their own path. There's no, let's say, right or wrong. But the fact that we can try to share that with others and go, listen, you're not alone in your confusion. You know, you're not alone. I'm not going to ask your age, but I don't know that we're from the exact same generation. So I think there could be a gap here to realize not that much has changed. I just talked to a young man, Ryan Dill. He's a YouTuber, and I just fell in love with this kid. He melted me in his late 20s, and it's like, so basically, not much has changed in college. Like some of the stuff is pretty much the same decades later. And I'm like, yeah, I think that is. You need to find yourself. And I think what you spelled out here was part of that for me. So I wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, Brandon, I really love what you just said. Everybody's journey is different, and you know, the, the purpose of the book or the message of the book isn't to say that you have to do it this way to get to this path. That's not the goal. The principal message that I wanted to share is that here are these 10 principles, 10 guiding values that will shape whatever direction you want to go in. So whether you
Yeah.
want to, you know, do college locally in your community and then work in that local community, or if you want to travel abroad, if you want to pursue a STEM career, whatever your path is, these 10 life principles are critical as guides, and it will only enhance that path that you want to travel. So follow that path, but remembering those 10 principles.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the things that you really tap into because you're coming at this from two different angles. You're coming at it from your academic experiences, which is kind of pushing you down a career path. But then
Yep.
you're also contrasting that with your passion for sports, your love of tennis, and then you also have this underlying theme that's threading all of it together with your faith and your morality and all of that. With the sports example, I think you really one of the things areas you really hit the nail on the head was we were talking about a lot of self control with our emotions and feelings, And society right now is in, like, to me, this is the backbone of a culture war where it's informational versus an emotional reaction. And they're constantly butting heads. And we're blaming and yelling and politics and all this stuff. And I'm like, wait. Talk about and maybe offer one of those advice tips to folks that are really, I got to get a hold of my emotions. I got to get, and whatever that emotion is, because I got to be honest, some of your principles can be applied to a range of emotions and not one particular.
It's a wonderful topic that you just brought up there, Brandon, and I'll try my best to be, creative in how I respond to your question. So what I heard was there's a lot of division. There is always an opposing view to life situations. Whether you're talking about politics, there's always the left and there's always the right. Whether you're talking about education, there's always the scientific side, but then there's also the artistic side. And, I've also lived that experience where it's been both. I've been in both worlds. I've lived the experience where it is very strong STEM, whether it, different courses at MIT, which were all about science and technology. But then on the flip side, I lived that experience where I was on the choir. I played the piano. I remember so many nights in college where the only way I could relieve that stress was going to the piano, which you can see right behind me. So the advice that I would share after living those experiences of living in opposite worlds, the advice that I would share is that image you can see above my head right now. It's a personal design based on my, artistic passions. It's a personal design that I implemented as my personal logo. And as if you look closely at it, you can see it's heavily influenced by the yin and the yang. On the left side, you can see it's black. And on the right side, you can see it's green, or in yin and yang, it's white. And there's always that opposing tension. What I've learned in my experience is that neither side is right nor wrong. So whether you are sitting on the right as a conservative, or sitting on the left as a liberal or a Democrat, whether it's STEM and arts, neither side is right versus wrong. In order to move forward as an individual, in order to move forward as a community, as one, you need both sides. So that was, and I'm so happy you're sharing the copy of the logo there, Brandon.
I get it as close as I can for you to get this. And he does a little section on this explaining some of the symbolism and imagery that he went for, and it was, I love that. I thought that was a great element to add to your expression and to your voice as a person. And I think it helps carry you through this journey in a lot of ways. There's another one in here too. The writing a letter to yourself was super cool. That's just super cool. It's I don't have a letter to myself. I have the poor man's version of a copyright where something I wrote, I mailed to myself, and I've never opened the envelope. And I thought to myself that I'm going to leave a little sticky note on top explaining to my kids what that is. So, God willing, when the creek don't rise, something does happen, they'll know that's what that envelope is. And when you open that, there were no hands in between. That was when I put it in the envelope to when you take it out. So that's kind of a bizarre way of looking at life. But yeah, this was really cool. This idea that and he talks about it. I can't get the imagery as clear as the book spells some of this out, folks. And again, this is why the photos were so important. And if you're thinking about writing a book, maybe we should talk about that, because I wrote one novel based on an idea that my daughter had for a story for young girls. And talk about writing, the process. I found it was it was interesting. I'll let you speak to what you think. I found it interesting in that it was harder in ways I didn't expect, and it was easier in other ways. Like, I don't know how to, I'm trying to figure out a best way to summarize that. So I'll let you talk first a little bit about your writing experience on pros and cons, because I encourage people to go through that experience. Even if you only write, let's say, 100 pages, there's something very special about pouring yourself out through that process. And even if you just stow it away in a desk drawer somewhere, just put a sticky note on it, let somebody know what it is if something were to happen to you. It's a cool experience to go through.
Cool experience.
Here, talk about that.
I think you're spot on there, Brandon. I love the fact that you brought it up. I think what has worked well for me when writing anything is you always start with the big picture first. You know, asking yourself, what is the message? What do you want to put together? And for me, going back to the creative side, I always try and bring it back to music. You know, so I've written several songs. You know, whether I'm singing at the piano, playing at the piano, and the number one thing that I always start off with is, what is the vibe? You know, what is the feeling? What is the emotion of this song? Is it a love song? Is it a spiritual song? Is it a, you know, a dancing, you know, happy kind of song? And then once you get that tip of the triangle down at the top, then you start working your way down. So after you get the vibe of the song or the vibe of the book that you're trying to write, then you start with the melody. You know, so it's coming up with a piano tune that is, you know, dum da dum dum dum, or, you know, what kind of melody you want to get to that. And to me, that's the hardest part. Once you start with the vibe, then building on the melody, then it all falls into place. You know, the lyrics of the song fall into place because you're a part of that song, you're a part of that book or the composition, so it just flows. So I think that was the main thing that worked for me during the writing process. Is it easy? I won't say it's easy. It's challenging. It's time commitment. But once you figure out the process that works for you, then it flows. So I would say that's my experience. How about you, though, Brandon? What would you say is your approach to writing?
So there were two main philosophies that I ran into when I was trying to figure out how I'm going to approach this. And there's John Grisham was like the extreme detailed outliner and planner for his books. And Stephen King was more of the idea person, and they would evolve over time. And it was like, he would even say things like, I didn't even know where this book was going, and I just allow it to kind of keep flowing, and then I would know when it's right. And I found both versions very scary because I didn't have either one in like any plan yet. So I had to figure out kind of a balance. So I think like you, I had to find the voice in an outline, or at least a general outline. I had to kind of like know I have a beginning, middle, and an end. I had to kind of have some structure, so I'm not just driving randomly in the wilderness. And then I had a lot of Stephen King to fill in gaps, where it was more like, I don't really know how this is going to play out. And I would write different scenes and I'd have gaps. And it's like, I don't know really what happens between point A and F, but I know A and F. So I got to just get from there to there. And it would just eventually keep working themselves out. And it was an interesting process. And like I said, there's something very, I think, cathartic and in your self-discovery about yourself. You also have, I mean, there are massive life lessons and words of wisdom in your book where it talks about perseverance. That tests your mettle when it comes to perseverance, writing a book, because mine took, I mean, I spent 3 years from the very beginning idea to I have an actual physical copy. How long would you say was your timeline to do?
You know, that's a very good question. And I'll give you the honest answer. Because I had the time, it was during that transition between business school and you know, working at Emerson. So I had a little bit of downtime, and I dedicated my entire summer to just writing, to just getting the idea down, getting the framework down. You know, let's use this as an example. You know, in the book, it talks about 10 life lessons. When I was writing it during the summer, I started off with just writing down all the different ideas or lessons that I would want to share. And I wrote down all the content at that point. So the book was done in terms of content within a short period of time. So let's say between, May and September timeframe. But it was the fine tuning, the polishing, the putting it into the right order that took a lot of the time. Because, sometimes, let's say I'm driving and something click at me. And I say, you know what? That's such a powerful statement. And then I need to include it in this specific chapter. But then when you think about the chapter flow, you need to go through this step first before you can go to this step. So all of the content creation was a short amount of time. And then to polish it, to fine tune it, to put it in order, to go up the steps, that's where it took a lot of time. But that was the fun part, to go back and say, did I say that?
Yeah.
All right. I was very honest with myself.
Yeah. And you are a lot of credit. And, I really want to touch on your love of tennis. You refer to different professional athletes, and, you make mention of your love of sports many, many times in the book and that kind of thing. I don't think there's really any of your 10 that you can kind of take out of any one profession or goal or anything like that. But you associated with in one chapter in particular, you're talking about respect, and you talk about different things. Like, is there one thing in particular you're like, if athletes don't have this, they're not going to make it. It's not going to work out. I know we talk about perseverance. That's a cheat. That's like a cheater one. I have to take that one off the table because that's like because if you're an athlete or you're struggling in that arena at all, and you don't have a certain element of self-determination and perseverance, because no one wins every single time. I mean, Michael Jordan had a rough start to his career from a win-loss record. Things like that. It's like nobody wants to remember some of that hill climbing. I hear it all the time on YouTube because people always see things and you're like, yeah, but this person's been doing this for 10 years. This person's been doing this for 8 years, or, like myself, I came from more of like a radio background, more like in like online reporting and, that kind of stuff. So for those of us that are doing this, a lot of us have a backstory that people don't see, and it's easy to get frustrated. So speak to that a little bit if you could.
I love the question, and it's the first time I've gotten a question like this. So kudos to you there, Brandon. There are 3 critical principles that I would say is absolutely necessary to be successful. But before I go into the 3, I think you mentioned respect, and I want to highlight that before going into the other 3 because in the book, I shared a unique story. I'm not sure if you watch Cool Runnings, Brandon. Have you ever watched Cool Runnings?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Hang on. Yeah. I mean, I'm okay. I have a whole channel of just me being the movie nerd. So, yes. And the best part of that is the internet's perfect for someone like me, because if I don't know something, I go down the rabbit's hole. So for me, because I wasn't witnessing the Jamaican bobsled story in real time, I see a movie like that, I'm immediately down the rabbit's hole trying to learn and educate myself and really get the grasp, because then I have an appreciation for the film beyond just the film itself. I have an appreciation for the effort to capture something historic, capture the stories of these individuals, all of them. And some movies it's villains. I was like, I didn't know certain pieces of stories, and I can only better understand. So, a true story like that. Oh yeah, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of a lot of sports movies are like in that sweet spot where they're not like the all-time great list, but they're so rewatchable. They're in this middle ground of good. I don't want to say great, but just really good movies. You know what I mean? I just love, and it's definitely in that category. I could watch it every year for the rest of my life. It could just be on that kind of that cycle of, yep, let's watch that. You know what I mean? So
So you know what's funny though, I'll share with you, Brandon, that the first time I watched Cool Runnings in Jamaica, I wanted to turn off the television. And
mm,
the reason for that, and this is where every Jamaican would agree with me, because I actually did the same experiment with my dad a few months ago. Every Jamaican thinks those accents are just not the best representation of Jamaica.
yeah, yeah, I
You
understand.
know, and that was my mindset when I first watched it or started watching it. And I was like, these accents are just not real. But as I got older and my son was born, my first son, Malachi, was born, I started to, watch these kinds of shows over and over. And the scene that just resonated with me about respect was when the teammate asked his other teammate to look in the mirror and tell him what he sees in the mirror.
Hmm.
And what he said was, I see pride, I see power. Those were the two powerful words that just resonated with me. And I think that is one of those key elements for success in sports. And just anything in life. You have to respect yourself first. You have to believe in yourself. That sense of belief and respect is so critical. Um, so to supplement that statement on respect, the three lessons that I hold dear to my heart is number one, you called it already, perseverance. I think that's, as you said, it's predictable, it's a cop out or whatever. It's absolutely necessary though, perseverance. The second one that I would say is it's love. And you can define love as whether you a love for the sport or the game itself, a love for your teammate, a love for your opponent. But I define love as that sense of reciprocity. What would you want? How would you want to be treated? And that's why I think tennis is so pivotal as a sport to showcase these life values. Because when you think about it, no matter how brutal or how painful a match is, at the end of that match, a handshake is reciprocated. At the end of a tennis match, both players meet at the net and they shake hands. And whether you've lost or you've won, you would want your opponent to give you that respect and show that level of reciprocity um, in playing that game or competing that game together. So I would say reciprocity or love is that second piece. The third one is not that obvious, and it's something that we all have to continue to grow on. Um, but it's the lesson that I learned the most from Roger Federer. The first male tennis player, to hit that 20 Grand Slam threshold. No other player has done that before. He shares it right now with Nadal and Djokovic, and I respect all three of them. But when I think of the value that I've learned over the years from Roger Federer, it's humility. It's being in that game or being a part of that sport and having the humility to put your emotions aside, not become flustered, not ready to break your racket when you're angry, not ready to curse at the opponent, the crowd, or the umpire, but to be humble, to internalize all of those emotions and choose the best step forward. And when I think about what the connection to life, so humility is clear in the sport of tennis, but where I see it so critical in life is it manifests itself in service. So when I think about what's the core reason of writing this book, it's the mentality or what's inside my heart, being humble to serve the next generation, to serve others by sharing this story in a transparent way, to give them the tools or share with them the tools that will guide them to their level of success. So, in summary, I would say it's definitely respect for yourself, looking in that mirror, seeing pride, seeing power. But the three lessons, the three values that I think are so critical to my life. I can only speak about myself. I've read it in several other books, but speaking for myself, it's perseverance, it's love through reciprocity, and most importantly, it's humility. Humility to serve, humility to be a team player, humility in so many different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And anyone that's watched any of my shows know that as a person of faith, as a Christian, Jesus was very clear that the humans are not very good at doing all this stuff on earth. And he broke it down to two rules about loving God with all your heart and then loving your neighbor like yourself, which is basically translation is being selfless. And that's going to begin with your humility to realize, hey, listen, you serve something bigger than you. And in doing that, you can serve others. And I think that's the crux of so many of life's successes. And you do it here, man. It's a great job on Secrets from MIT, tennis, and the Umpire Above. So transitioning to that a little bit, I thought I'd challenge you a little bit to share a little bit about your faith journey.
Absolutely.
Where your family, how you grew up and what that journey's like. Because a lot of folks, I think, especially right now when you're going through a pandemic and a global crisis, and we have any economic woes and job changes for so many people, they don't know where to turn. And I always talk about, well, I have one place you can start, and talk a little bit about your journey, what your faith journey is, and what it's been like.
Well, I'm extremely happy you brought that up because that's such a central part of my life here, Brandon. So my faith is clearly one of the reasons why I wrote the book. When you think of the umpire, I started off with the book saying, should I say God? Should I say Allah? Should I say not a Jah? Should I say another, representation of God? And I chose the umpire because clearly the book is about tennis, and the umpire maintains fairness. And that's what I think, God maintains throughout this world. It's a level of fairness. Even when things may seem like it's not going right, there is that moral arc, as Martin Luther King says, that always bends towards justice. So whether that bend occurs right in the moment or 2 weeks later or 10 years later, there's always that moral arc that bends towards justice. So when I think of my faith, there are three elements that I would share with you very transparently here. I grew up in a Christian home. Jamaica is, what Jamaica to me is renowned for its spirituality. It has the most churches per square area than any other country on this earth. So when you think about the concentration of churches in a specific zone, Jamaica has the highest concentration. So I grew up in that kind of community, strong in Christianity, grew up preaching. I remember I did my first sermon at age 7, roughly, in church. I grew up singing on the choir. But when I went to college at MIT, the very first day, I learned something new about spirituality. I learned something new about myself. On the very first day, it was international orientation. And I met so many diverse students, all of them smarter than I am because, they are the geniuses. I just went through and tried to adapt and survive, at MIT. But the first friend that I made was from Saudi Arabia. And my friend, her name was Yasmin. we started talking, and I introduced myself to her. And when I told her my name, TARICK, she's like, "What?" And I was like, "Why are you reacting that way?" I had no idea, Brandon. And she said, "Do you know what your name means? And how did you get the name?" And I had no clue. It's a pretty, semi-rare name in Jamaica, but I had no idea of the background. But when she explained to me that in the Muslim religion or, Islamic culture, the name Tariq has a very special meaning. And when I heard that, I got a different perspective. And that perspective is there is one God, that's my belief, but there can be different interpretations of that God. So whether we call that God, Mother Earth, Mother Nature, Jah, God, Allah, you go back to even more historic periods, it's the old Jewish cultures, they had different names. So that was the first lesson that I learned in my life about my faith. And as I continued to learn and read, I met my wife in college. And my wife is the complete opposite of me. So when I think of yin and yang, she's the perfect yin to my yang because, as you can see, I'm pretty dark, but she is white as snow. And what the impact that she had on me at that time was understanding her background. And her background is Jewish. So when I think of all those three elements there, Brandon, I grew up in a Christian environment, got to learn that the name, or I'm a part of the Islamic or Muslim, belief or culture there. And then at the same time, the Judeo or Jewish background. And when I think of when I was writing the book, should I attach a specific name to each of those? And the answer is no. I'm a part of all of them. I'm a part of this world, and being a part of this world, we're all connected to that one God that maintains that moral arc in society. So I think that's my, my spiritual journey in a nutshell. We can go deeper, but it's the takeaway there is diversity, but it's still one God. And that's a powerful lesson that I learned very early in my life.
Yeah, I love the fact that you use the term umpire. I can't tell you how many times doing a sermon or something I have used the term about that it's not my job to call balls and strikes. Coincidence? I've always said, listen, I can only give you the best instruction I can give you based on the information that I have, but you can be mad at God all you want because he's the one calling your balls and your strikes. So yeah, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. So I know I don't have you much longer. So talk a little bit about where folks can get the book. And is there another book coming? We got something else in the hopper that you could share with everybody, let everybody know what's next.
Absolutely. So to access the book, it's on all platforms. So whether you shop at books through Barnes and Noble, through Amazon, Target, the book is available across all those platforms. And if you go to my website, you will get a direct copy or a direct link in accessing it. The website is twaltongroup.com/book. So it's once again, it's twaltongroup.com/book. And to answer your follow-up question there, Brandon, absolutely. In the way I see my path moving forward, I want to write 3 books in total. So I'm currently working on the second book. The first book, or I guess I break down the 3 different books into different periods of my life. The first book is clearly from youth, growing up in Jamaica, to right at the tip of adulthood, going to college. And that's Secrets from MIT, Tennis, and the Umpire Above. The second book is from that specific graduation moment to becoming who I'm meant to be. Mm. The third book is a perspective of all of those different periods of my life. So whether it is, going on to retirement, and, quite frankly, however many years I'm blessed to walk this earth, that's not the definition of, the period of the book, but it's more the journey. So the journey from childhood to college, book number 1, the journey from college to becoming who I'm meant to be, book number 2, and the journey from becoming who I'm meant to be and looking back on the difference, or trying to broaden that impact, that's book number 3.
Well, folks, I will put links here, of course, for you, so you'll know. Here's the website, twaltongroup.com. We'll put a link in the description. Of course, you go over here, you'll see this, and right here you'll see book. And when you click book, you'll hop right over, and you'll see there's TARICK with the book, and of course there's the book closer, and a great video message from him as well. So, it's been great to get to know you, my brother. It really has. I appreciate it very much. I know everyone's busy these days, got a lot going on, and obviously, like I said, the pandemic stuff's created a lot of chaos in the world. I'd love to be able to chat again, talk about stuff anytime, so we could just keep going and going, but I know we got stuff to do. But thank you so much for fitting this into your schedule, my friend.
Absolutely, Brandon. It was such a pleasure to touch all these different elements and to share that story, share our perspectives. And I really look forward to catching up again. And I'm always here, ready and willing to converse with you.